Life behind bars in Britain. Survival inside UK prisons. A grey prison building stands under a cloudy sky. Razor wire curls along the fences like sharp metal snakes. A prison van slowly drives through the gates as they open with a heavy mechanical sound. The atmosphere feels cold, serious, and unforgiving. Text appears on screen. Life behind bars in Britain. Survival inside UK prisons. A loud bang hits a metal door early in the morning. An officer's voice shouts, "Unlock." A man suddenly wakes up on a thin prison bed, confused and scared. He looks around the tiny cell, toilet in the corner, bars on the window, another inmate watching him silently. His breathing gets faster as reality hits him. He is in prison. Prisoners walk in circles in the exercise yard under watchtowers and cameras. Two men start arguing in the background while officers quickly move closer. The tension is thick. A voice says, "Inside prison, one wrong move can change everything." The screen cuts to black, building suspense for the story. The prison transport then slows down as it enters through large metal gates topped with razor wire. Daniel sits inside, hands cuffed, heart beating fast. The windows are covered, so he cannot see much outside, but he feels the vehicle turning and stopping. When the doors open, cold air hits his face. Officers tell him to step out. He looks up and sees tall stone walls and security cameras watching every corner. At that moment, he understands his old life is officially over. Daniel is escorted into a processing area where bright white lights make everything feel harsh and uncomfortable. Officers give clear instructions in firm voices. He is told to stand still, remove his shoes, empty his pockets, and open his mouth for inspection. The search feels embarrassing and personal, but nobody treats it like a big deal. For them, this is just routine. For Daniel, it feels like losing control of his own dignity. After the search, Daniel receives prison clothes, a simple gray tracksuit, plain underwear, and cheap shoes. The fabric feels rough compared to what he is used to wearing. An officer hands him a rolled-up mattress and bedding pack. Holding these items makes everything feel more real. This is not temporary. This is where he will live now. He walks down a long corridor with officers on both sides. Doors slam somewhere in the distance. Prisoners shout from behind locked cells. Some voices sound angry. Others sound bored. The building smells like cleaning chemicals mixed with sweat. Daniel feels small and exposed, like everyone can see he does not belong here. They stop in front of a metal door. The officer unlocks it and gestures for Daniel to go inside. The cell is tiny, 2 beds stacked, a metal toilet in the corner without privacy, a small barred window letting in weak light. Another prisoner sits on the lower bunk, watching him quietly. Daniel hesitates for a moment before stepping inside. The officer removes Daniel's handcuffs and closes the door. The loud clang echoes in the small space, making Daniel flinch. That sound hits him harder than anything else so far. It means he cannot leave. It means someone else controls when he moves, eats, sleeps, and breathes fresh air. The other prisoner stands up slowly and introduces himself as Mark. His voice is calm but firm. Tattoos cover parts of his arms and neck, and his face shows years of stress. Daniel shakes his hand nervously. Mark notices immediately that Daniel is new and scared, but he does not judge him. Mark explains basic things about the cell: where to store food, how to use the kettle, how the toilet works, and when officers do checks. He talks casually, like someone explaining house rules to a guest. That small kindness makes Daniel feel slightly less alone, even though fear is still sitting in his chest. Outside the cell, prisoners shout to each other through doors. Some joke. Some argue. One man keeps yelling for an officer. The noise never fully stops. Daniel realizes privacy does not exist here. Even when locked inside, you are surrounded by other people's voices and emotions. Daniel sits on the bed and presses his hand against the mattress. It is thin, and he can feel the metal frame underneath. He tries to lie down, but his body stays tense. His mind keeps replaying the events that brought him here, the arrest, the court, the sentence. Regret starts creeping in. Mark notices Daniel staring at the wall and starts talking to distract him. He explains that the first night is always the hardest because everything feels unknown. He tells Daniel that fear is normal and that most prisoners go through the same emotions when they arrive. Hearing this helps a little. Later, the lights dim slightly but never turn off completely. Officers walk past occasionally, looking through the small window in the door to check on prisoners. The hallway footsteps echo loudly. Daniel feels like he is constantly being watched, even when lying still. As the night gets quieter, Mark shares survival advice. He tells Daniel to stay respectful, avoid borrowing things, and never show panic in front of other prisoners. His tone is serious now. He explains that prison is about reputation, and first impressions matter more than anything. Daniel hears distant shouting followed by a loud bang somewhere down the wing. His body stiffens instantly. Mark barely reacts, which shows this kind of noise is normal here. That realization scares Daniel even more. If chaos is normal, what else might happen? Hours pass slowly. Daniel turns from side to side, unable to sleep properly. The sounds of keys, footsteps, and distant voices keep pulling him awake. At one point, he stares at the ceiling and finally accepts the truth. This is his life now. Tomorrow morning, he will wake up still inside the cell, still locked behind the same door. And the journey of surviving prison will truly begin. A loud banging sound explodes across the prison wing early in the morning. Officers walk down the corridor hitting doors with batons, shouting, "Unlock! Stand by!" Daniel wakes up suddenly, confused for a second before remembering where he is. The dim light above the door is still on, and his body feels stiff from the uncomfortable bed. Mark sits up calmly like this is normal. He stretches and tells Daniel, "That's the wake-up call every day." Daniel rubs his eyes and notices how cold the air feels inside the cell. The reality of prison mornings begins to sink in. No alarms, no comfort, just orders and routine. The cell door unlocks with a loud click. Officers shout instructions for prisoners to come out for breakfast. Daniel steps into the corridor for the first time during morning movement. He sees rows of metal doors, officers holding keys, and prisoners walking in lines under watchful eyes. As Daniel walks down the stairs with Mark, he hears conversations everywhere, jokes, arguments, complaints about food, and people asking about court dates. The building feels alive with noise and tension at the same time. He keeps close to Mark, unsure where to look or how to act. They reach the food-serving area, where officers hand out trays. Daniel receives a small breakfast, cereal, milk, and bread. It looks basic, nothing like what he is used to eating outside. But his stomach reminds him he is hungry, and he takes the tray quietly. They sit at a metal table fixed to the floor. Daniel notices how prisoners naturally sit in groups. Some tables are loud and confident, others quiet and serious. A few prisoners sit alone, watching everyone. He realizes there is an unspoken order here that he does not yet understand. A prisoner bumps Daniel's shoulder while walking past. Daniel freezes, unsure if it was an accident. Mark calmly says he's with me, without even raising his voice. The man keeps walking. Daniel learns that respect and alliances matter, even during simple moments like breakfast. After eating, officers begin counting prisoners. Everyone must stand still while numbers are checked carefully. Nobody complains because everyone knows counts are serious. Daniel feels like an object being counted rather than a person, which makes him uncomfortable. Mark explains the daily schedule while they wait: work assignments, education programs, exercise time, and long hours locked inside cells. Daniel is surprised to learn how much time prisoners spend confined, sometimes even most of the day depending on staff availability. Daniel receives his job assignment: cleaning the wing. An officer gives him gloves and supplies. He feels embarrassed at first, but Mark tells him jobs are normal and help pass time. Daniel realizes having something to do might actually help his mind. While cleaning corridors, Daniel notices details he missed before: scratched paint, dents in doors, names carved into walls. Every mark shows years of people living here before him. It makes the place feel older and heavier with history. Some prisoners joke with him as he works, while others ignore him completely. One man watches silently from his doorway with an expression that makes Daniel uncomfortable. He remembers Mark's advice about staying calm and respectful no matter what. Around midday, officers shout, "Bang up," and prisoners return to their cells. Doors slam shut again across the wing. The sudden quiet after movement feels strange. Daniel realizes he is locked in for hours with nothing to do except think or talk. Inside the cell, Mark turns on the small television and makes tea using a kettle. He explains that routines help prisoners stay mentally stable. Without routines, time feels endless. Daniel listens carefully, understanding that survival here is not only physical, but also mental. As the hours pass slowly, Daniel stares at the walls and feels loneliness creeping in. Even though hundreds of people are nearby, he feels isolated. Just when he starts getting used to the quiet, distant shouting suddenly echoes through the wing, a sign that something unexpected may happen again. The cell door unlocks in the afternoon with a loud click. An officer shouts, "Exercise," down the corridor. Mark immediately stands and tells Daniel to come with him. Daniel feels a small sense of relief because it means leaving the cell, even if only for a short time. They walk through several locked doors before stepping outside into the prison yard. The cold air hits Daniel's face, and for a moment, he just looks up at the open sky. After being surrounded by walls all day, the sight of clouds feels strange but comforting. The yard is surrounded by tall fences covered with razor wire. Cameras sit on poles, watching every movement. Officers stand along the edges, observing quietly but carefully. Daniel realizes there is no real freedom here. Even outside, you are still trapped. Prisoners walk in slow circles around the yard. Some talk in groups, laughing like old friends. Others walk alone with their heads down. A few stand near the fences, smoking or staring into the distance. Daniel notices how everyone seems to have their own way of coping. Mark explains quietly that the yard can be peaceful or dangerous, depending on the mood of the prison that day. He tells Daniel to stay aware of his surroundings and not get too comfortable. Daniel nods, trying to observe everything without looking nervous. Daniel notices groups forming naturally, men who seem connected by friendship, background, or shared experiences. He understands there are invisible boundaries between groups, even though nobody talks about them openly. Two prisoners begin arguing loudly near the fence. Their voices rise, and tension spreads quickly. Daniel's body stiffens. He watches carefully, unsure what might happen next. Mark tells him quietly to stay calm and keep walking. Officers quickly move toward the arguing men before anything serious happens. Their presence alone is enough to stop the situation. The prisoners separate, muttering under their breath. Daniel feels relief, but also realizes how quickly things can change. A friendly prisoner approaches Mark and greets him casually. Mark introduces Daniel as his new cellmate. The man nods and tells Daniel the first week is always hard but survivable. That brief kindness surprises Daniel and makes him feel slightly more hopeful. After the man leaves, Mark explains that not everyone in prison is dangerous. Some people simply made mistakes or had difficult lives. Daniel starts to see prisoners less as stereotypes and more as individuals with different stories. In one corner of the yard, Daniel sees prisoners lifting homemade weights made from bags filled with water bottles. Others do push-ups or jog in place. Mark explains exercise helps release stress and keeps the mind stable. Daniel realizes physical strength can also mean mental strength here. A whistle blows loudly, signaling the end of exercise time. Prisoners immediately begin lining up to return inside. The calm atmosphere disappears quickly as officers organize movement back into the building. As Daniel walks back through the doors, the outside air disappears and the heavy indoor smell returns. He feels the emotional difference instantly. Outside felt slightly free, but inside feels controlled and tight again. Back in the cell, Mark makes tea and sits down. Daniel asks if Mark ever feels scared in prison. Mark admits everyone feels fear sometimes, but says survival comes from learning how to manage it. That honesty makes Daniel trust him more. As evening approaches, Daniel reflects on the day. He understands now that prison survival is not only about avoiding fights, It is about managing emotions, building routines, and understanding people. But deep down, he senses there are still many things he has not seen yet, and that thought makes him uneasy. Night falls inside the prison, but darkness never fully arrives. The small light above the cell door glows dimly, casting shadows across the walls. Daniel lies on his bunk staring at the ceiling, trying to relax, but his body still feels tense from the unfamiliar environment. The wing is quieter than during the day, but not silent. Distant voices echo through the corridor. Someone coughs. Another prisoner talks through the door to someone in the next cell. Every sound travels clearly through the building, making privacy impossible. Mark is already lying down, looking comfortable like someone used to this routine. He tells Daniel that nights can feel long because there is nothing to distract the mind. Daniel nods, realizing his thoughts are louder than any noise around him. Suddenly, a loud bang shakes the corridor. Daniel jumps up instantly, his heart racing. Another bang follows, then shouting. A prisoner somewhere down the wing is kicking his door hard. The metal echoes through the building like thunder. Voices begin shouting back from other cells, some angry, some annoyed. The noise spreads quickly. Daniel feels panic rising in his chest because he does not understand what is happening. Mark stays calm, listening carefully without moving much. The shouting grows louder. A prisoner screams for officers, demanding attention. The emotional intensity in the voice makes Daniel uneasy. He realizes this is not just anger, it sounds like frustration and desperation mixed together. Footsteps run down the corridor as officers respond. Radios crackle with urgent communication. Orders are shouted firmly. Stand back from the door. The authority in their voices cuts through the chaos slightly, but tension remains. Daniel hears a sudden heavy thud followed by brief silence. His imagination fills with worst-case thoughts. He whispers to Mark, asking what happened, but Mark admits he is not sure. That uncertainty makes Daniel even more nervous. After a few minutes, the shouting slowly fades. Officers' footsteps move away. The wing returns to quiet, but the atmosphere feels heavier than before. Daniel realizes calm can disappear instantly here, without warning. Mark explains that emotional pressure builds inside prison, missing family, guilt, anger, boredom, and stress all mixing together. Sometimes people lose control because they cannot release those feelings in healthy ways. Daniel listens carefully, beginning to understand the psychological side of prison life. Daniel lies back down, but his body remains tense. His ears stay alert for any new noise. He feels vulnerable knowing that problems can happen close by even when he is locked safely in his own cell. Time moves slowly. Minutes feel like hours. The dim light and quiet surroundings make Daniel feel trapped inside his thoughts. He starts thinking about his life outside, family, friends, freedom, and regret grows stronger. Mark speaks softly in the darkness, telling Daniel that fear is normal but temporary. He says the key is learning how to control reactions instead of letting fear control you. His calm voice helps Daniel relax slightly. Eventually, exhaustion takes over, and Daniel falls into light sleep. Even then, small sounds wake him repeatedly: footsteps, keys, distant voices. Rest in prison is never deep or fully peaceful. Before morning arrives, Daniel wakes again and stares at the faint light above the door. He realizes something important. Prison is not only physically restrictive, it constantly challenges the mind. Surviving here means learning to handle uncertainty every single day. Morning arrives again with the familiar sound of officers banging on doors. But today, the atmosphere on the wing feels different. Daniel notices prisoners whispering more than usual, talking in small groups with serious expressions. It feels like something important happened overnight. As Daniel and Mark walk toward breakfast, Daniel senses tension in the air. People glance at each other carefully, like they are measuring reactions. Prison may look controlled from the outside, but inside it has its own social world that changes every day. Daniel quietly asks Mark about the strange mood. Mark explains that situations between prisoners can affect the whole wing. Even if only two people have a problem, everyone else feels the tension because conflicts can spread quickly. At breakfast, Daniel notices how seating arrangements seem organized without anyone giving instructions. Certain people always sit together. Some tables appear more respected than others. He realizes there is an invisible structure controlling interactions. Mark begins explaining prison politics in simple terms. He tells Daniel that respect, reputation, and trust are extremely important. People watch how you act, who you talk to, and how you respond to pressure. First impressions can shape your entire sentence. Mark also explains the prison economy. Items like snacks, phone credit, toiletries, and favors can all become forms of payment. Daniel is surprised to learn that borrowing something small could create serious problems later if you cannot repay it. A thin prisoner approaches their table and briefly warns Mark that new prisoners should be careful. The conversation is calm but carries hidden meaning. Daniel feels nervous because he does not fully understand what dangers might exist yet. After the man leaves, Mark reassures Daniel, but reminds him to stay alert. He explains that not every interaction is friendly or hostile. Sometimes people are simply checking boundaries. Daniel realizes communication in prison often has layers of meaning. Later during his cleaning job, Daniel experiences his first personal test. A prisoner calls him over and asks if he has phone credit. The question sounds simple, but Daniel remembers Mark's advice about debts and obligations. Daniel answers politely that he does not have any. The prisoner studies him for a few seconds, trying to read his confidence level. Daniel keeps his voice calm and respectful, even though his heart is pounding. The prisoner eventually shrugs and walks away. The situation ends peacefully, but Daniel feels shaken. He realizes even small conversations can carry risk inside prison. Every response matters. When Daniel tells Mark what happened, Mark praises him for handling it correctly. He explains that staying calm and respectful often prevents problems from growing. Daniel feels a small boost of confidence for the first time since arriving. As the day continues, Daniel observes interactions more carefully. He notices how some prisoners command natural respect while others try too hard to appear strong. He begins understanding that true confidence looks different from aggression. Back in the cell during evening lockup, Daniel reflects on everything he learned. Prison survival is not about being the toughest person. It is about awareness, patience, and smart decisions. This realization changes how he views his situation. Just as Daniel starts feeling slightly more comfortable, a loud alarm suddenly echoes through the building. Officers shout orders and footsteps run down the corridor. The tension returns instantly. Daniel looks at Mark, realizing that in prison, calm moments can disappear without warning, and something serious may be happening very close to them. The camera slowly moves through an empty prison corridor at night. Metal doors line both sides, each one holding someone with their own story, regrets, and hopes. The faint sound of keys jingling echoes as an officer walks past. A voice explains that prison is not just a place, it is a test of the human mind and spirit. Daniel sits quietly on his bunk, staring at a small photo from home. His expression shows a mix of sadness and determination. The dim light above the door casts shadows across his face, showing how much he has already changed in such a short time. The voice explains that survival inside prison often begins with learning to face yourself. The exercise yard appears again, but this time in slow motion. Prisoners walk in circles under the cold sky, while officers watch from a distance. The narration explains that every person inside those walls is counting days, weeks, or years, all waiting for a second chance that may or may not come. The final shot shows Daniel lying down on his bed as the cell light dims slightly. The metal door remains closed, strong and unmoving. The voice says that freedom is something people rarely value until it disappears. The screen slowly fades to black with the words, "The story continues."